Good then, Debbie,
We should be good.
recording and everything? Okay,
Recording.
very good. Good evening, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock for the Committee of the Whole for Monday, April 3rd, 2023. There was no closed session this evening, so we'll move right into the open session. So the first item is the adoption of the agenda. Could I have a mover for adopting the April 3rd, 2023 agenda as to be adopted as presented? Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Willis. All in favor, please raise a hand. Motion is passed. Disclosure of pecuniary interest, general nature thereof. Any disclosures this evening from council? Seeing none. Delegations and presentations. We have Nicole Goodman, Associate Professor, Department of Political Science, Brock University, which is going to be presenting the 2022 Municipal and School Board Internet Voting Study Report. And she will be coming on virtually.
Hi there. Sorry, I wasn't sure. Am I supposed to speak now or?
Yes, welcome. Yes, you're in the audience now, so there we go. So yes, this is your time. Whenever you're ready, you can just go ahead and do your presentation.
Okay, sorry about that. I wasn't sure if I was allowed to start speaking or not. Just 1 second, I'm going to pull up my slides for you.
She's always on it. There's connection.
I think so.
Okay.
Hi there. I'm really sorry about that. I apologize. My computer completely decided to shut down as I tried to share my slide presentation. So if I'm just reloading my computer, it's 80% there, and I should be able to rejoin and share my presentation.
Okay.
To not take up business, is there an item of business you wanted to address just while I get everything going, or did you want me to start talking without the presentation?
We can, yeah, we'll just wait for your computer. If it's that close, we'll just wait for it to be ready to go.
Okay.
Most of our items are going to have a little bit of discussion, so I don't want to delay yours by that much.
Okay. I'm just going to join. My computer's up now. I'm just going to join with it. I'll be right back on. Sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, shall we bring her stuff?
I'll just make note there, your worship, that both full reports are on as part of the agenda as possible.
Have a good job.
Okay, so apologies. I have it here. I'm going to just going to take 1 or 2 steps here to share this.
Okay.
Technology. I think the problem was that Zoom decided to update, I guess, simultaneously, unfortunately. So just 1 second. I'm just going to plug in my screen here. And then I'm going to share my screen. Okay, great. And then I'm going to move my presentation over there. Great. So smooth sailing from here on out.
We go.
Okay, so just to confirm, just before I begin, you can all see my slides. Is that correct?
Yes, we can see your slides, and we do have the reports in our agenda as well.
Oh, fabulous. Okay, thank you very much for indulging me. So I'm really excited to be here tonight to be able to present this to you all. And I'd like to thank, the municipality for agreeing to participate in this really important research that, I think has some wonderful findings. My name is Nicole Goodman. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Political Science at Brock University. I also hold the Chancellor's Chair for Research Excellence there in voting technology standards. And so I have studied this for the topic of internet voting and the modernization of elections for well over a decade. And I'm considered to be, I would say, one of the foremost experts in Canada and internationally as well. So just to give you a little bit of background, internet voting has been used in the province of Ontario since 2003. The motivation to move towards internet voting was really at the time, around that time, to enhance voter turnout. A lot of communities had looked to voting by mail, and there had been some limited success. So not seeing, desired increases, they went to telephone voting, and then from there on in internet voting. And there has been a slow and steady increase with the use of internet voting with each election cycle. And there were 222 municipalities that used it in these most recent elections. About 231 had approved it for use, but of course there was many municipalities that had acclamations. So, it's significant growth. It's 56% of the municipalities in the province that are eligible to run elections. And you can see just through this map, this is a graphic representation of the municipalities that used it in 2022. And, a majority of the province, well, we can only see the more southern part, but looks quite blue. And this is just a chart that just goes through the phases of adoption and clarifies, small changes that have happened with adoption. Given the time, I'd be happy to speak to this if there's any questions. Okay, great. So the report today is going to look at the data specifically from your township, from the Township of Loyalist. This was a survey conducted with online voters. And how it was conducted is after casting a ballot, voters were invited to take a survey about their voting experience. And all of the research process, the methodology, and the survey was approved by Brock's Research Ethics Board. So I'll be doing a high-level overview today of, the data and survey completion, voter satisfaction, how voters get most of their information, their attitudes, their participation, and some key comparisons with the last election in 2018 that you folks also participated in. Great. So this is a list of the municipalities that participated in 2022. It was a little bit smaller than it had been in the past, and that is because one of the vendors decided that they did not want their clients to take part. This is the respondents by municipalities. You can see that Markham, they had a lot of respondents there, and you can see how your respondents compare to the other municipalities that took part. In terms of survey completion, 217 surveys were completed in the township of Loyalist out of 2,853. So this is a response rate of 7.61%. The survey period was open during the voting period from October 17th to the 24th. A majority, 86% of the surveys were completed in advance, and 14% of them were completed on election day. And the average length of time across all municipalities to complete the survey was 8 minutes. And this just shows you a breakdown of survey respondents by age in your community. So you could see how they compare to voters. So you can see, there wasn't as many individuals in the 18 to 24 age category that took part. This has been common across all of the surveys. Part of this is a function of the fact that this group just participates a little bit less and, maybe less likely to stick around for a survey. And so as I'm going through today, there will be some comparisons. I'll be comparing this to the larger data set, which was just shy of 30,000 voters took the survey, and some comparisons to 2018. That was a much larger survey. And that year, there was 933 respondents in Loyalist that took the survey. So, the other point I wanted to make is that it's really nice that you have this 2018 comparison, because COVID was an exogenous shock that took place in between. And so it allows us to compare changes before and after COVID, which is fantastic. Okay, so in terms of satisfaction, I have in my notes here, wow, with 4 exclamation points, because this is the highest level of satisfaction I saw across the municipal reports that we did. 99.6% of respondents said that they were satisfied with online voting. And of that, 91% said they were very satisfied. You can see from the chart on the screen that no one reported being not satisfied at all. All I can say is, again, emphasize that this is the highest level of satisfaction I've seen across all municipalities. So, your election team did a fantastic job of implementation. That is quite clear. To compare of the other 24 communities that took part in the study, you can see that 96% of voters reported being satisfied and 79 of those very satisfied, which was similar to the results in 2018. So Loyalist, it stands out with higher satisfaction. In terms of voter satisfaction looking at age, you can see that there's strong satisfaction among all age groups. It's highest among voters under the age of 34. And this is actually an interesting finding. It's an anomaly compared to most other municipalities. So there are some very interesting characteristics about these results in the township of Loyalist. Only voters aged 45 to 54 reported dissatisfaction with the online voting experience. So that's notable as well. So of the younger people who did vote, they were quite satisfied. If we compare satisfaction by age to 2018, we can see that those that reported being very satisfied were up among all age groups, especially younger voters, and dissatisfaction decreased among all age groups except for those aged 45 to 54. So overall, it was quite positive. And then if we take a look and compare Loyalist in 2022 with the broader sample, so the full internet voting study sample, we also see that Loyalist respondents, as I mentioned, report greater satisfaction across all age groups and are more likely to report being very satisfied. So when it comes to satisfaction, voters are very satisfied with the online voting service in Loyalist. In terms of rationale for use, this compares results in Loyalist from 2018 to 2022, so you can see if there's any changes. We can see here that health and safety concerns emerges as a new issue. But other than that, positive past experience has gone up a little bit. In terms of trying something new, there's fewer respondents because it's been around, but convenience is the primary driver for use, and that remains consistent with 2018. And then with respect to explanations for satisfaction, so what are voters saying about why they're using it? These comments in the callouts on the screen are from voters who were satisfied with the voting process. And these comments are sort of representations that resemble the bulk of comments that were received. And they highlight a few key items. One, a majority of online voters in Loyalist felt that the online voting system was easy to use, accessible, and convenient.
2, the instructions were clear and easy to follow, even for many persons with weaker digital literacy or older voters. And this is highlighted by some of the comments above from the elderly voters who used and were thankful for the process. And then appreciation for the process design would be the third element. This is, being able to vote 24 hours a day, and to have the option more generally. And you can see here that these comments also highlight how online voting appeals to different groups of voters. So seasonal residents or those who don't live in the area, busy working residents, those who had COVID, young families. So you can see here, there's a comment in the bottom, very simple, easy to use, easy to understand, with no room for confusion, very fast method to vote, was faster to do online than go down to the fire hall, especially with a 4-month-old. So this is someone with a young family who's saying, it would have been harder to vote otherwise, additional barriers to vote. This other person says, I found it very user-friendly. It was easy to follow the instructions and I was able to vote when convenient without any COVID worries. As a cottage owner, this person at the top is reporting. So this is someone who's a seasonal resident. This other person here, easy and convenient. I'm too lazy to walk all the way to the polling station and not sure I would have the time that day. This other person's talking about lineups being long. So you can see really, a wide range of individuals. Many of them are saying it just made it more convenient, but for some people, we do find that it enhances their participation, and that's clear from this comment here. Privacy was also a key benefit that was articulated in the comments. And of course, less potential exposure to COVID was also emphasized. Okay, in terms of voting information, this is source of voting information compared from 2018 to 2022. And we can see that, the voter information letter is the most important across both election years. In terms of changes, one of the interesting shifts that we've seen is that digital sources grew in importance from 2018. This includes things like the municipal website and social media, and items like word of mouth or other people were slightly less important in 2022. This just provides, again, an additional comparison. Just for the sake of time, I'll skip over it. And this looks at source of voter information by age. And I'm going to speak to this in this next slide here to give you a better representation. So here we've highlighted for you the key information sources by age. I want to note that only one person from the 18 to 24 category answered this question, so that's important to point out. But we can see here that there's a diversity of information sources across age groups, flyers and posters, word of mouth sources like friends and family were really important for younger voters, as was social media. However, online sources were equally appealing for older voters, as well as candidates and news media. So this sort of just breaks it down quite clearly for you to see what were the top sources of information that appealed to that age group. Overall, municipal social media was most important for those aged 35 to 54. So overall, the voter information letter remains the best source of information to inform Loyalist voters, and this is the same across communities across the province. News is especially important for those over 35. We did see a bit of an interesting trend in this election where news sources start dropping off a little bit, especially for younger voters, and digital sources are becoming more prevalent. And that's not really too surprising with COVID because it pushed everybody online. Word of mouth sources like friends and family continue to remain a really important source for the under 35 group. And we saw digital sources rise, social media in particular, very effective for the 25 to 44 group, and municipal website very effective for those 55 plus. So given the great diversity in information sources, a combination of traditional and digital mediums, basically a blended approach is what's recommended in the next election. We also asked, moving on to voter attitudes, we also asked voters about their COVID perceptions and how they felt about COVID. And you can see here, Loyalist was pretty much on par with the larger internet voting study sample. 86% of respondents said that it was important for Loyalists to offer online voting in the 2022 election because of COVID-19. And we saw that in the comments. 58% said it was very important in Loyalist. So we can say that in your municipality, COVID remains an issue, or at the time did, for a majority of online voters surveyed. And this just shows you how important it was. We also asked about worries with COVID-19, and 54% of online voters said that they are worried about COVID-19. So overall, a lot of respondents felt it was important that it was offered to, enhance accessibility because of the pandemic. Now, you might be interested in security concerns. So, we've talked about a lot of the great aspects, really strong voter satisfaction. People are happy with online voting. How do they perceive the risks? So we asked about perception of risk. We asked about it in a few ways. We asked whether people felt online voting was risky or safe on an 11-point scale and on a binary scale. So that means we offered them, we said, rank on an 0 to 10-point scale. Do you feel internet voting is risky or safe? And then we asked the other half of respondents to just pick risky or safe. And 77% of respondents presented with the binary option, so that's risky or safe, identified internet voting as safe. 11% said it was risky and 12% said don't know. When we asked them on this scale, the average, so the mean, was 8.56. So the top possible score for that would be 10. So, approaching 10, and this is trending toward perceiving online voting as safe. We also asked them to agree or disagree with the statement, paper voting is not needed in municipal elections when internet voting was available. And you can see here that 61% disagreed and 29% agreed. So while the risk perception is low and people are very satisfied with it, they didn't necessarily agree that paper voting should just be taken away or wasn't needed. We also asked about security concerns. You can see that and this is comparing Loyalist to the larger sample. You can see that the Loyalist respondents report, the largest proportion report saying, I don't have any concerns. And this is a little bit greater than the IBS sample as a whole. Next, we move on to security concerns. And then typically in many municipalities, we would see fraud next, but in Loyalist, we see lack of internet access next, and then fraud. So, of course, when we combine, some people will often say, oh, well, security and fraud are the same thing. Well, even when we combine them, still the largest proportion of respondents is saying they don't have concerns. And this is kind of what we see across the board. We also asked about trust in voting methods. These are all of the different voting methods that we asked about trust for: paper, internet, telephone, and mail. You can see here that while paper voting is most trusted, internet voting is close behind. I'm just watching my time here. If you have any more questions about anything or want to deep dive at the end, please let me know. So overall, what can we take away from this? Well, the online voters in your community are accepting of online voting, and they felt it was important that it should be offered given the pandemic. Trust in online voting is really strong comparative to other voting methods. While paper voting trust is the highest, online voting is close behind for all ages. Most respondents, the largest proportion of respondents, say they don't have any concerns. Security concerns do remain a concern for some, and we've done some tests in this election to see how that could, not in your community, but in other communities, to see how we could potentially lower security concerns. And educating voters about the technology is one way of doing that, and I'm happy to speak to that. Standards is another thing that could potentially offset security concerns, and those are currently underway, and again, happy to speak to that. However, 61% of respondents still felt that a paper complement was needed. Okay, next, moving on to voter profile and participation. So this is something a little bit different that we did in your community, because we looked at a bunch of different results to give a digital profile. So to give you a sense of, does internet type differ from income? Because some of the other questions, lack of internet access, had been identified as more of a concern than it was in the more general sample. So there wasn't any large differences that we found in internet type based on income, except that wireless was more common among those with lower reported incomes. Cable is most common among those making over $110,000 annually. And then this is looking at internet type by area. The more significant divide that we found is by area. Urban voters are far more likely to have cable, while rural voters rely much more frequently on satellite connections and wireless devices. So that might be something to keep in mind for future votes. So what does the average internet voter look like? So this is comparing Loyalist with the sample as a whole. And we can see here that, the average internet voter is over the age of 50. In Loyalist, they have an annual household income before taxes of $60,000 to $90,000. They have an education of some university. Their voting history is very habitual. So this means they're likely to say that they vote in most elections most of the time. And they're somewhat interested in politics. And in terms of comparing this to 2018, we looked at that for you as well. Voters in Loyalist are a little bit younger and more educated. Household income remains the same, and voters continue to vote habitually. So when it comes to participation, I'm happy to speak to this after, but there is research that looks at voter turnout and the effect of online voting on voter turnout. But a simple method that we can use to try and tell if the introduction or implementation of online voting is engaging voters to take part is by looking at their past voting history. So if voters say that, they probably would or definitely would have not voted otherwise, and they report having not voted in the past, we can say, with decent certainty that this is probably encouraging those individuals to take part. And so 13% of respondents in the Loyalist sample said that they probably or definitely would not have voted without online voting. 13% of the sample say that they did not vote in 2018, and 5% said they were not eligible. And this chart just basically speaks to that and emphasizes that. So we know that online voting can help with everyday life issues, things like being too busy with a young family, having a mobility issue. Maybe you get too busy with work. Maybe you have to care for a sick loved one, or maybe you're out of town. For all of those reasons, internet voting can help. For political reasons, this is like, lack of interest, apathy, it's less helpful for that. And obviously for administrative reasons. Now, one of the interesting things is candidate information. So lack of candidate information is also lumped into political issues. And one of the best strategies so far that we've seen work for that is just educating more about candidates. A lot of municipalities have started to create a web page where they would what's called Plan Your Vote, where they would put the bios, or candidates would have to submit their bios and they would upload them there. And it would be a centralized kind of hub where individuals could check their information, candidate information. And again, happy to speak to that more at the end. Okay, so online voters and Loyalist overall are quite similar actually to the larger sample, except that they have slightly more committed voting histories and lower household income. It is worth noting that internet access and type of internet access varies by urbanity, and that was reported a little bit more frequently as a concern in Loyalists, so that might be helpful in planning. But overall, the evidence points to the fact that online voting can encourage the participation of some electors based on the access and convenience that it offers. Okay, so before we get to takeaways, I just want to do a key comparison for you. So this compares key items from the 2022 survey with the 2018 survey, so you can see how things changed over time. Just pull up the full slide here. Okay, so if we look at overall satisfaction with the voting process, we can see that there was an increase. It went up. It's approximately 100 because it's 99.6. So we're rounding up here. In terms of the percentage of respondents that said they were very satisfied with the online voting process, that increased. We also broke it down by advanced voters and election day to see who was more satisfied. And you can see that that increased in both cases, actually quite significantly for election day voters, over 10%, which is very interesting. Would recommend online voting to others, that stayed the same, but I mean, it's 98%. You can't do much better than that. Would vote online in future municipal elections, went down just by 1%. Voting in all elections, so this just reports on participation, went down slightly. Interest in politics was up. So overall, the key takeaway that we can take from this slide is that, in 2018 compared to 2022, there's been a big upswing in satisfaction. Oops. Oh, there we go. Sorry. And then we also looked at digital, some digital literacy items and concerns. So between 2018 and 2022, I don't have any concerns with internet voting went down. Security is my top concern, went up a little bit, and fraud went down a little bit. So we can talk about that after, about education and how to lower those. In terms of digital literacy, you can see across the board that there was an increase. I'm sure that's not surprising to many of you, given that COVID pushed a lot of people online. The reason why we highlighted some of these activities is because they require the use of personal information for online transactions, which is important. You know, things like shopping and banking and putting your personal information out there. And so that's important. So digital literacy has gone up quite a bit in Loyalist, and that might have something to do with the increase in satisfaction. Okay, so overall, what can we take away from this? Well, we can say that online voters and Loyalists are satisfied with their experience, and the satisfaction has increased since the last election. Most of the online voters are choosing to vote online for convenience. Positive past experience has grown in importance, and that's great because that's showing that people are happy with it. Digital literacy is up quite a bit, and a majority of online voters continue to say that they don't have concerns with online voting. We could further lower these concerns with education. In terms of trust and risk perception, most voters trust the voting method and perceive it to be safe, and are less likely to think it's risky. However, many continue to support paper ballots as a complementary voting method. In terms of sources of information, so you'll probably remember that the voter information letter was the top source of information. Newspaper, TV, radio, and word of mouth were also top sources. Municipal website and social media were also important, and they grew in significance since 2018. Again, probably part of the COVID digital revolution. In terms of information sources by age, I mentioned a blended model being, the best strategy moving forward for 2026. And online voting continues to encourage some electors to be part of the process. So overall, the results show that the Township of Loyalist made improvements to the online voting experience, despite already having really strong ratings in 2018. I know I'm at 25 minutes, so I'll stop there. If anybody wanted me to speak to broader considerations, I could do that, but I don't want to be really respectful of time. Did you want me to try and speak to it in 5 minutes?
Wish to see the rest? Yeah, please proceed with the rest of it.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is the final section, and this is just basically my analysis of looking at everything and the advice I can give across communities. So one of the trends that we saw in this election was the introduction of some different technologies. So historically, back since 2003, online voting has been primarily web-based. So people will use a phone or they'll use their laptop, and it's been done in a web browser, and votes have been stored, in a web database. In this election, we saw verifiable voting introduced for the first time, and we also saw blockchain introduced for the first time. 13 municipalities used verifiable voting, and ballots were verified in 5 of those. This basically allows voters to ensure that their votes were cast as intended, and if the full verifiable system is used, counted as cast. Most companies will use an app to verify votes, and then blockchain was used. 15 municipalities used that in this election. So why do we care about this? Why is this interesting? I did a few tests with some municipalities to see, when we educate voters about technology, what impacts, or how does that impact their satisfaction? How does it impact their security concerns? And how does it impact their trust? And so I'll quickly report those findings to you. So this chart, this was done with the city of Markham, and there was over 13,000 people that took part in this study from Markham. And before the satisfaction question, I included what we call an informational prime. So this is just a sentence that talks about the verifiable voting system that Markham used. And I'm happy to share that with you if you like. My thoughts were that this was going to increase satisfaction. Well, you can see that it had the opposite effect. So I just want to make clear that this one sentence in front of the question was randomly exposed to the sample. So out of the sample, half of them saw the prime and half of them did not see the prime. And you can see that those people that saw the prime were less likely to report that they were very satisfied with online voting. Well, why is this? You might be surprised by this. Educate people about technology and they say they're less satisfied. Well, part of it might be because our homes, for example, you don't necessarily think about the security of your house, but if you have someone who's a specialist come in and start telling you these things, you might think, oh, I never thought about that. So this difference is statistically significant. It was caused from the prime. But what was interesting is that other questions were also affected. So willingness to recommend it to others was affected. It was a smaller difference, but it was statistically significant. But the better part is that when we get to security concerns, those people that were exposed to the prime were less likely to say that they had security concerns. So they were less likely to report security concerns, and they were more likely to say, I don't have any security concerns. And that was also statistically significant. So that is a positive finding. So while it did bring satisfaction down a little bit, overall it lowered security concerns, and that may be what a lot of municipalities want. Now, we also did a test on trust. So you can see here we had we basically asked in two different other municipalities. We asked about trust with, mail, phone, internet, paper, and we asked internet with a security feature and internet without a security feature. So this is the regular sample. So this is the survey that Township of Loyalist voters were given. And the scores here that are presented are mean scores. So this is the average score, the average reported score between 0 and 10. So you can see that paper is quite high across all groups. Mail, a little bit lower, telephone a little bit lower, and internet in the general survey is 8.3, which is quite high, pretty good. It's the next highest. Then when we started introducing, okay, would you trust more internet voting with a ballot tracker ID or a QR code? We see that to maintain trust, once voters are educated, they want to know that it has that security feature, whereas trust in internet voting without the security feature declines, in this case, below all of the other voting methods. So what can we take away from this? Well, educating voters about specific security features may not have a positive effect on satisfaction or increased trust. However, once voters become more technically savvy and they become aware of the possibilities and security features, their trust in technology may decline without knowledge of these features. And there's also evidence to suggest, as I mentioned, that this information decreases security concerns. So this is my final slide for this here. So some of you may be asking, okay, well, then what are we supposed to do? So we did a separate survey. We did a random representative survey with of just over 1,100 Ontarians between October, and November, right after the election. And we asked them to rank their trust, or not to rank, we asked them how much they trusted on a scale of 0 to 10, internet voting with all these different features. And so I present the mean scores here for you. You can see that there's not much of a difference between an app or voting by web, and that voting with a printable receipt or a verification app was rated most highly. So I'll leave that there. In terms of turnout and engagement, we do find systematically that online voting increases turnout. 3.5 percentage points if voting by mail was in place beforehand, and up to 7 percentage points if it was not in place beforehand. As I mentioned, just to show there is science behind me saying that it increases turnout. We know that uptake is highest when there's no registration requirement and when online voting is available for the full election period. 9% less people use it when it's available in advance voting only. And we know that online voting can be harder to bring youth and visible minorities on. And then finally, I just wanted to let you know about the standards that are underway. I am currently working with the Digital Governance Council on standards for online voting. This will be for municipalities across Canada, and they will be out before the next election. And, I'm trying to give it some advice to people. I know it can be overwhelming if the standards document is going to come out. And so my advice to the township would be, even if you can't adopt all of the elements, if it's a lot, maybe use the elements to guide your RFP, maybe pick, 10 of the top elements. And the goal is hopefully that the standard will, help build capacity in municipalities. Yes. So anyways, those are my key thoughts. This is by myself and Nathan Olmstead, and thank you very much.
Thank you for that presentation. Council, do we have any questions for the presenter? Councillor Broderick.
Thank you, Dr. Goodman, for the presentation. I just want to sort of throw something at you and maybe just get your thoughts on it. So in your survey there, question 11C, what was the main reason you did not vote in the last municipal election? And 31% responded, I know it's a low sample size, that they didn't feel informed. And yet question 13, 83% access internet daily. So there's sort of a disconnect there. You would think that the fact that that many people access it and have a strong use of it for tasks in your survey there, that number seems a little high, or, you know, they don't connect really. And I'm really surprised that your last sort of bit there on youth not using it, because you'd think that that would be the age cohort that would be comfortable with online, especially the phone and so on, but just your comments on that.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for the question. I'm going to go backwards. So yes, this is quite strange, but overall we find that older voters are actually more likely to use online voting despite having lower digital literacy and being less confident in their digital skills. Young people are a little bit less inclined to use it, and these findings have been replicated in the Netherlands and in Norway, so it's not just Canada. And so our theory on this is that young people are voting for probably the first time, or if not a very one of the first times in their voting career. And so they really sort of treasure having this personal voting experience as a rite of passage. Now, certainly this doesn't apply to all of young people. Part of this is just because young people participate less than other groups do, and that has always been the case. And then with respect to not feeling informed, so that's interesting. You mentioned like people not seeking the information out online. This was sort of a common thread that we saw across a lot of the reports, where a lot of respondents were saying that they did not feel informed. And what I have been suggesting, what is the best piece of evidence that I can offer right now, the town of Whitby used a web page called Plan Your Vote in this election. They didn't use internet voting, they just used paper voting, but I did a survey with their paper voters. And so I was able to kind of take a deep dive and see, were people more satisfied when they used Plan Your Vote? Did they feel more informed? And the answer was yes to both. People who did use the web page were more satisfied, and they felt more informed. And that was just what I said earlier. I'm happy to give more information, or Chris Harris is the clerk in Whitby. I'm sure he'd be happy to share. He knows I'm going to be mentioning it. But they just asked candidates to give their core platforms and put it on a web page. And it was a one-stop shop. I think they promoted it in their voter letter. Maybe I'd have to double check that. And it was like a one-stop shop for people to go. And then, it lowers the cost of having to go to all these sites and trying to track down that information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Reyes.
Thank you. And thanks very much for the presentation. Just had a question about the voter information letter, and with it being the number one source of information for voters, I wonder if you've seen anything in your work about best practices for how that letter's sent out, when it's sent out, what's included in information in that letter.
That is a fantastic question. I haven't seen anything, but I can tell you anecdotally that so one of the reasons I think that Markham had a lot of ballots verified and a lot of uptake with everything was because they promoted it all in their voter letter. So that seemed to be a really successful strategy. So if you want to introduce a new aspect, like they introduced the option to verify your ballot afterwards, and they had, I think, about 2,500 voters verify their ballots compared to like 100 in other municipalities. So I think including the most pertinent information on the voter letter is crucial. And if you want voters to engage in some other aspect of the election, be it like a survey afterwards, or if you decided to use a Verify app or something like that in the future, or Plan Your Vote webpage, putting that on the voter letter, if you could fit it on, would be the best way to get that information out there.
Thank you. Council, any other questions or comments? Seeing none. Thank you very much for the presentation and for the information that it provided. some of it was a little surprising, but I guess when you stop and think about it and you explained it, it does make sense, especially with some of the voter. It caught me off guard that the younger ones, which you think would use it, actually didn't use it as much. So, council, could I have a motion to receive? Councillor Broderick, moved, seconded by Councillor Ennis. All those in favor, please raise a hand. Motion is passed. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity and for taking part. Have a lovely evening. Thank you.
So we'll move on to our staff reports, and up next, more election information, 2022 post-election report. So you have some information to share? Do you, or
Just a very brief, so the report is there in regards to the post-election. Some of the information that Dr. Goodman had shared as well on that just goes into what will come forward in the for the 2026. So all that information that's gathered will be in the report going forward. But so this 2022 post-election report is presented for information purposes and reflects on the preparation leading up to the 2022 municipal and school board election, the election management and voting period, the election results, and the key priorities when planning for the 2026 municipal and school board election. And we want to confirm that lessons learned from comments, challenges, concerns, etc., that we faced throughout this or past elections, as well as what Dr. Goodman has included in hers of what areas that we could look at, helps us maintain a focus in continuing to modernize and develop best practices to ensure our elections meets the needs of loyalists with integrity, impartiality, trust, and confidence that we exploit. I'm pleased to say that we also do have surveys that go out to candidates and to election workers that also helps us in informing additional information that goes forward to election. I also want to briefly touch on the delegation that appeared before council. It is included on page 5. It is somewhat brief in that, again, without knowing the options that council will go, which will be coming forward in another report, and we'll have additional information in regards to how we would be able to look at that going forward. So, so we've identified a few, but want to assure council that more information will be coming as we know what that will look like for 2026. And the other for the going forward into the 2026 municipal election, of course, will be starting even now. So it's not left to the last minute, is the ward boundary and council composition review report, voting methods, equipment, voting locations report, communications. So again, we've got the communications, but again, how we can do that better in both the online and paper voting. It's interesting to hear the 61%. And again, I would say that's probably we've heard that clearly even from residents that paper voting is welcome. And then a review of our election related bylaws policy. So the sign bylaws, the council resources, those types of things that'll be coming forward. So that was just kind of a synopsis of the report, and we're here for any questions.
Council, any questions or discussion? Councillor Willis.
Through your worship. All candidates meetings, so there were only 2 in this election. There have been more previously because different community groups had organized them. Is there any thought about the township organizing all candidates meetings so that we do have that opportunity and candidates can be prepared for it?
We have discussed that. I know in my former municipality, that was something that we did look at doing. It can be seen both ways, you know, of whether that's in the interest of the election staff to host those, or for the township, just because it can go either way. I think it's, you know, part of what the information, again, of what Dr. Goodman said about having the portal for counselors to put their bios. I know the Napanee Chamber for business improvement had done that, and that's something that we could look at doing on ours. I don't have a concern of having it. I think, again, the opportunity, I think it's part of the Election Act. It is something that is there for us to be able to give every opportunity for the candidates to speak and for residents to be able to listen. But again, it's a fine line of what election staff does versus what you know, the township would do.
Proceed.
More of a comment than a question. Perhaps then what could be considered is putting together a best practices for hosting an all candidates meeting that could be shared with the groups that might be in the community that would do it, because they may not know how to start, and some of them have run very well organized.
Through your worship, yes, and again, on something like that is we would, so again, I think as council is aware, we did attend any that we became aware of. So if we could help out in somebody organizing them, and some, again, communication going out to the organizations earlier on, that would be something that we would look at.
Councillor Proctor.
Just more comment than anything, just what Dr. Goodman said. I look at your report here and it says, you know, 9,600 people access the elections page, and 1,167 access the list of candidates. And I can't remember, did we put a biography in? It was just a name. So maybe even that, you know, if 10,000 people basically have looked at it, that'd be a huge step forward to put some kind of biography in it.
Through your worship, it's something that we had a lot of people, you know, even when we were attending those, of asking where they can get the information, pamphlets, but yeah, it's, we heard that pretty clear.
Any other questions or comments from the committee of the whole? So we're a little more relaxed. Deputy Mayor.
Just a comment, and on kind of piggybacking on both Councillor Willis and Councillor Broderick, and it won't be anything that we in this room don't already know, but you know, campaigning is a bit of an art and a science as well. And you know, in advance of the elections, there's probably a lot of utility in providing you know, whatever our candidate information packages are about the kinds of things that are fairly standard in campaigns, to be able to, you know, allow electors to have, you know, the kinds of information that they want on candidates. You know, I know, you know, if someone's never, I mean, you know, for a politico like me, who's either run lots of elections myself or been part of other elections, you know, some things just become second nature about what you want to provide, right? But if someone's running for the first time, there's a lot they likely don't know.
Through your worship, that's a good point. We do the one with the ministry, but you know, can we look at additional? That might be something that would be good. I know this was the first time that we have done it with the having candidates come in and to speak to them before, to go over it, where before a lot it was just get it off the internet, bring in your nomination papers and file it. So and again, just from the comments we received back from candidates, that was well received, and you know, again, I think it would be something that we would expand on, and what that would look like going forward into 2026. And I just, in regards to the voter information letter, I hear what you're saying and what Dr. Goodman was saying. Some of those are pretty prescriptive, but I think again, on part of what she was saying is the RFP is ways that we would have to look at. So typically what's in there is very election related versus being able to do the advertising and that type of thing, but that may change again with the rules that they're trying to look at coming up to the next election.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from council? Councillor Proderick.
Motion to receive.
Motion to receive, second by Councillor Budrick. Any comments? I just have a couple comments I'm going to provide before I call a question. I was actually a little surprised at how low the turnout was, considering the enhanced media that it got. It was all over social media. The township did a good job of making sure everyone was aware there was an election, making sure, places to come to get information regarding it. And also, as early as back in the summer, going out to all the different functions that were going on in the communities, setting up a tent and making sure that everyone could come and make sure they were on the voters list, and make sure they were aware of what to do. I thought the township staff did a really good job at being out there and almost being in their face, trying to get them to come and ask questions and let them know you were available. So I thought that was very good. And the one thing that I noticed this time, it almost seemed like there was voter fatigue. The provincial election was in the spring, and there were times that when I talked to people, they'd say, I thought we just finished an election. And you'd have to explain that this is the municipal level and not the provincial level. And so I found there was a little bit of confusion on that. And whether it was voter fatigue or just confusion, I don't know. But I think between the two of them, quite possibly that played into it as well, which I know is out of our hands. The dates are what they are. We're handed the dates. So those are my statements. Any others? Call the question. All in favor, please raise a hand. Motion is passed. Thank you. Family Physician Recruitment Incentive Program. CAO coming forward. So, good evening. Do you have anything additional to add to the report or?
I have nothing to add to the report.
Okay, so council, we do have the report in front of us. It covers a fair bit of ground. And there are some questions in here about how council wants to proceed. Do we want to open it up for comments or do we want to, okay, I'm seeing nods. I'll open it up. Any questions or comments from council? Councillor Broderick.
I just have a question to you, Cecile. So we're sort of talking with physicians in terms of the 5-year minimum. How would that work for other practitioners? We sort of using the same type of philosophy, a 5-year incentive?
Yes, we, as proposed, I have in the report, we've recommended that the funding be for about a 10-year period to allow for 5 physicians at $100,000 over a 5-year period each, so $20,000 each. The report is recommending that that be opened to not just family health team physicians, but any physicians with custodial illness would be eligible for this. And it's actually been more beneficial than new physicians that we could recruit that would take on new clients. The report is also recommending the use of the program for nurse practitioner-led clinics, perhaps at a reduced price. We looked at $75,000 over 5 years is what the proposal is right now. So the report is recommending that. What staff would do is if council is amenable to that, those conditions or those criteria, we'll come back with the actual program and get council approval for the actual program and spending. But yes, we would. I have had discussions with an RN who is interested in investigating a nurse practitioner-led clinic. You can see there's some information in there. When I spoke with Kingston, although they didn't commit to it, they said, what, there might be some announcements coming about nurse practitioner-led clinics. Kingston has committed to $250,000 per year and has been very successful in recruiting 15 new physicians to Kingston. But they too are looking at other health practitioners, and we would look at, I guess not others, but just nurse practitioners. Nurse practitioners do have the option in the model right now that works to allow them to potentially get $800 which is about 3/4 of the size of a general family physician practice. So I think if in the coming years, if there's money in this reserve fund, as staff are recommending established, that they would too be eligible for this in order to recruit and bring them here to Loyalist. I think either of those options would be beneficial to the residents.
Just a follow up, just so I'm clear. So we're looking at, although it was the Amherst-U family health practice, this is going to be open to any doctor who wants to relocate here, whether it's another practice or.
I believe we can presuppose their willingness or desire to be there. I don't know why they wouldn't. The family health team and the family health organization are preferred models for new medical students and residents coming out. It is a fantastic model, and we have a beautiful facility here. It's like, I can't see why they would want to set up their own practice, but I do understand there are other family doctor physicians in Loyalist, and if they wanted to recruit a physician to go in with them, I don't think we should exclude them if we do get a new family physician coming. I'm hoping because of the preferred method, the family health team might be the first 5 here. We have also recommended that it just be 5 or that sort of $500,000 at this point. If there's great uptake in this, then staff can certainly come back and ask council if you're willing either to put more money in. Currently, we're recommending $60,000 as funded currently the first 2 years from the Vibrant Fund, that staff be authorized to make an application for that. And then subsequent to that would come out of the tax levy. We would certainly look for grant opportunities. At this point, nothing's been found. There are no special pots of money. We are going to be speaking with provincial representatives and those kinds of things. It's not something new. As you can tell from the report, the number of municipalities that have to offer this program is not insignificant across the province. And I think it's a large discussion of Ministry of Health officials and our MP regarding profits should be stepping up. But one thing they can do is I think most people see the value of nurse practitioner-led clinics, not just family physicians. They cost less to fund and quicker to come out of their schooling as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a long-term proposition. I think this is something that we need to do in Loyalist in order to be competitive in our neighborhood. I am very hopeful or very happy to hear that the recruitment team in Kingston does consider us to be part of the region, and in terms of physician recruitment does provide supports, including what's called dual career services. So they help the spouses of family physicians coming with job application, looking for houses, schools, that kind of stuff. They are willing to share also some of their resources, such as the return for service agreement that they've negotiated with their physicians. They would share with us as well.
Thank you.
And just going back to your first question, just to make sure that it is clear, the model that's here is a pretty standard model of 20,000 a year for 5 years. Basically, all we're doing is matching the bar of the municipalities around us. Councillor Willis.
Your Worship. I note, and it's nice that Kingston has been successful and that they would support us on page 6. So there's a comment that they've offered to provide advice for recruitment of physicians because such physicians could provide service to residents throughout the Kingston region. What kind of assurances can we have that these 5 doctors will actually roster from Loyalist Township residents if we're paying for the program?
Very little for us to recruit physicians that are replacing retiring physicians.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If a doctor comes back, they will acquire the patients that are rostered with these physicians. I don't have the numbers. So at the family health team, they have approximately 10,000 rostered patients, of which less than 4,000 come from Lennox and Addington. So currently, the physicians at our family health team, only 40% of their patients come from LNA. And that's all of LNA, not just. Similarly, in Kingston, from the staff report you see from there's a significant number of physicians in Kingston that take residents from Loyalist. So it is there's no guarantee. So what we could guarantee that if we provided, it would be provided in the agreement that if there's a new physician coming that has not rostered patients yet, we can put a minimum required on that agreement for the services, which we would do that. I don't think it would be fair to say 100% of their patients, but some percentage of their patients need to become wireless. But if this is used as the family health team has requested to replace 4 retiring physicians, they will accept the existing roster of patients. Also, just realize the existing roster of patients from a very long established physician is much greater than 1,200, which is the number that you would be looking for a new physician. They're probably closer to 2,000 patients.
Continue, please.
My favorite topic. I'm concerned that the funds are being proposed to come out of the Renewable Energy Benefit Fund. Primarily because ultimately this is benefiting a private business, and doctors, though they have their huge tuition bills, end up making a lot of money over time. And I question whether this is what that fund is intended for. And if that's the appropriate source. Do we have another source where the cost for this could come out of the general rate?
We didn't have a magic wand. The treasurer wants to come up and ask that question, answer that question. We, as you can see from the proposal, likely for this budget year, we would only need 20,000 to start the program. And so we probably can find the money for $20,000 for this year from existing funds. However, in order to fund it going forward, then any for future would be a tax levy requirement. So then we'd have to include in the 2024 budget enough money to fund this on a go-forward basis.
Yeah, nothing to add there. It's all said. I would say in most examples I found for other municipalities that have reserve funds for this, they are typically funded through operating levies, i.e. taxes, unless there's some special thought, but we do not have that. So.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Councillor Ernest.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just on nurse practitioners, are we contemplating having this incentive program open to nurse practitioners that are a part of a nurse practitioner-led clinic, or any nurse practitioners?
Nurse practitioners can't get funding otherwise than through certain models that's approved through the Ministry of Health. So a nurse practitioner-led clinic is approved. Potentially, a nurse practitioner can join a family health team, and potentially that would be open as well. Is if we get a nurse practitioner who is actually rostering their own patients, depending on the funding model and which model they join, they may not roster their own patients. They may just be serving the patients of a family physician. So we would ideally want someone, and I can clarify that when we bring the report back, that it would have to be someone who's rostering their own patients.
Yeah, it's just so the family health team model and the nurse practitioner clinic model. And I was just thinking, you know, this is might be an evolving phase. If the ministry comes out with new models, you know, can we adapt to that, you know, within the parameters?
Yes.
As well on the nurse practitioners and the sort of the contemplating of proration. So in the report, it's, the average physician is 1,200 rostered patients. The average nurse practitioner is 800 rostered patients. Proration for nurse practitioner. What if a physician wants to join the family health team, for whatever reason wants to roster only 800 patients in order to join the team? Do they still receive the full physician incentive, and the nurse practitioner, well, with their 800 is less?
Your worship. Right, through your worship. No, I believe it would be based on the 1,200 would be the amount that would be required for the full amount, and would be prorated if they came in. That would be my recommendation as part of the details of the program.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none. Sorry.
I just had a motion to recommend option number 2.
Program, okay. So moved,
Second.
seconded by the deputy mayor. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Wells.
Would the mover consider it a friendly amendment that it be sourced, the funds be sourced out of the general rate and not the vibrancy fund?
I honestly think we need to do what we have to do. I think this is an important situation where we've got many residents without healthcare, and we need to do what we have to do to get that taken care of as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, I just whatever we have to do, and if that has to come from if we just put in this and it's only Ward 2, 3, I'm fine with that as well. If that's the amendment you want on Ward 2, 3 vibrancy committee, if that's the money, I'm fine with that. But I just think we need to do what we have to do, no matter what. Get this ball rolling. Unfortunately, no.
You can still make an amendment that would go to a vote instead, but I'm not telling you what to do, just the option is there. Did you want to proceed with that?
Yes.
Okay,
I'd like to make an amendment that it be sourced out of the general rate for funding for it.
okay. And since I don't deal with this very often, I'm looking at clerk's department. Making sure that when the vote is called, is it what's the percentage? Is it just a half, 50%?
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to make sure I had it correct, that it wasn't the 2/3. Okay,
There's a question. So what are we voting?
So-
The amendment?
the amendment, so there's been a motion put forward to amend the recommendation that the funding be funded out of the tax base and not the vibrancy fund. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll call the vote. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise a hand. Opposed? Motion is lost. So back to the original motion, which was part 2. And a council direct staff to return with the report detailing the full scope of the program for approval, including details of the creation of a reserve fund for this purpose. Any other comments, questions? Councillor Broderick.
So. Right now, we're looking at, as the report says, funding from the vibrancy fund for 2 years. Is that what we're looking at?
Potentially that is what the report says, potentially up to 2 years, make an application for vibrancy.
I'm just throwing this out there. Why not make a application for 1 year and move the second year into the regular tax levy? I have to make a motion on that.
Do you want that to be a friendly motion for a friendly amendment?
I would propose it as a friendly motion.
Okay.
I'm fine with that, just because this one time first year, we just need to get going. I think we can get around to it on the second year.
Okay,
Yes, I think that is friendly, yes.
seconder, in agreement? That amendment is included then in the motion. Any other comments or questions?
I have a question
Please proceed.
for the treasurer. Through you, your worship. If the money doesn't come from the vibrancy fund, do we have it?
Through your worship, we do not currently have it in the budget. So we would either have to find other operational savings, i.e. Something that was in the approved budget, or we could potentially use stabilization reserves. I would just remind council, back to budget, those reserves are extremely leveraged already this year to come in at the tax rate that we came in at, so that would not be my preferred method. But there is money there.
And if money is taken from the vibrancy fund, could it be returned in future years? To that reserve?
There isn't anything in the current policy that speaks to that, but that's not to say council couldn't sure make such a motion. Yes. There's something went back to it. It's certainly not in the current vacancy policy.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Call a question. All those in favor of the motion, please raise a hand. Motion is passed. Community engagement framework. You have, okay, you've got a presentation. That would be quite fitting from the communications and new initiatives coordinator, I guess, to have a presentation for us. Please proceed.
Thank you. Sure. 1 second. You want to
All right, sorry for that delay.
Okay.
So tonight I'm here to present the draft community engagement framework to you. The little background on the framework. It was directed as part of the 2019 to 2023 strategic plan, identified as a key strategic priority during the process of the development of the plan. We began working on that soon after the strategic plan was adopted. However, COVID did disrupt the plans to develop that engagement framework, since in-person engagement opportunities were pretty limited at that time. So we did develop a draft framework back in 2021. And since that time, we've been testing and refining the framework throughout a number of different projects the township's been involved in. A lot of learning opportunities along the way, and we're definitely getting some momentum underway now where we're able to get that in front of the public and engage with them a little bit more often and speak with them, definitely gather some feedback and input on different projects. So just to touch on the sorry, well, copy there. The goals of the there we go. So some of the goals of the community engagement framework. So ultimately, number one is about establishing consistent application of engagement practices and principles across the township. So we want to create a consistent and clearly defined process, for the community of what engagement looks like to them and how they can engage with the township on decisions and projects. But also to create a consistent and clearly defined approach as well for staff in terms of how they are implementing these engagement processes as well. So through the effective implementation of this framework, we can identify and use the highest level of engagement appropriate to the situation. And then the goal of community engagement is not necessarily to achieve consensus on every issue or decision, but to ensure that decision making is well informed and provide citizens with the means and opportunities to share their ideas, experiences, and knowledge when appropriate. And through that, this will help foster a positive public municipal relationship and can assist council in making solid policy decisions as well. So one of the other things that we've developed as part of the engagement framework is a communication and engagement techniques and tools matrix, which has been developed to support staff in determining which communication tools are available at their disposal. And with the support of the communication division, they can determine which tools can be implemented to achieve the highest level of engagement among citizens. Obviously, the matrix will constantly be developed as the township explores new ways to communicate and engage with the community. So I can tell you, since the time that we initially developed this draft, This matrix has been changed many times with different suggested ways to reach out to the community. And I think as we heard from the presentation right at the top of the meeting, with residents, everyone receives information in different ways. So it's really important that we look at a variety of ways that we're reaching out to residents, because one person might receive information differently than another. And also sometimes with frequency, there's a bit more retention on information. The more people see it, the more likely they are to retain and to act on that information. So we're constantly looking at new ways that we can reach out to residents and stakeholders as well. So the engagement framework is made up of these elements. These are this sort of high tier of the different concepts that are included in the engagement framework. So has been created around guiding principles, levels of community engagement. There's a 5-step work plan for anyone that's undertaking engagement activities on the township's behalf as well. And as I mentioned, the engagement communication tools and techniques matrix as well. So I'll speak to some of these elements on the following slides. So the guiding principles basically describe the guiding principles basically describe the foundational principles that promote more open, effective, and equitable public participation that guides our decision-making processes. So these are the principles that have been identified through our framework. So planning and preparation, just providing clear definitions of the content, design, and organization of the engagement process, and also effectively communicating it to people of the township, which is crucial to achieving purposeful and decision-altering feedback and ideas from the people of the township. Accessible and inclusive. It's vital that everyone feels welcome and has the opportunity to participate in whatever activities make up the engagement process. So inclusive community engagement fosters a sense of welcoming, belonging, recognition, safety for all people. Some consideration should be given to accessible venues, accessible communication formats, alternative formats when necessary. Also to venue locations to ensure that we're getting an equitable representation from township populations as well. And just recognizing that some residents might have difficulties attending virtual meeting or open house due to limited or no connectivity. Again, something that we heard earlier tonight as well, which is kind of echoed. So while other groups might have more opportunity to attend in-person events due to a variety of factors. So just keeping those in mind as well, and making sure that the process is accessible and inclusive for as many people as possible. Collaboration and shared purpose. So the sharing of information and ideas is encouraged to support a shared cause, and that participants can work together as closely as possible. Clear feedback is reliant upon the building of trust through dialogue and the maintenance of open and efficient communication, and ensure the use of the inclusion of different skill sets and backgrounds, ideologies to guide that process as well. Openness and respect. In the interest of achieving shared goals, individuals should be open to the opinions of ideas of others and approaches them in an unbiased manner. So people should feel that they have the opportunity to safely speak their mind and share their opinions at recourse. And that's equally important for anyone facilitating those engagement opportunities and also for the participants. It's important that guidelines for participation are visible and established from the output, where appropriate at community engagement sessions. So that way we can establish what the guidelines are before anyone starts to participate in the process, and they can recognize that it's a safe space for them to engage and provide their feedback. Transparent accountability. So continue accountability throughout the engagement process is critical. The ability to answer any lingering questions presented by the public increases buy-in and can encourage future input as well. Including feedback received in a public report documenting what we heard does help to build trust and establish authenticity in the process as well. And finally, sustained engagement and participation. So facilitators and participants should maintain continuous engagement and participation throughout every process they are involved in to see it through the completion. In addition, the more practice that people become, the easier the engagement processes will be in the future as they start to navigate what the engagement process would look like. Also, relationships are built over time, so the more people participate in these engagement opportunities with the township and trust the process and understand that their feedback is heard and is acted upon when appropriate, that does help to build that relationship and trust with the process and the municipality as well. So the next element of the engagement framework is the levels of community engagement. So the levels of community engagement are based on the IAP2 spectrum of public participation. So that's the International Association of Public Participation. And they have a spectrum which identifies different levels of public participation. It's becoming a international standard for many municipalities and public organizations to use a spectrum similar to this or based on this spectrum. And there are 5 levels within the spectrum. So I'm just going to run through those with you. So the first level is informing. So as you can see from the diagram there, the communication is largely one way. Participants are generally passive recipients of information through the informing stage. But this can also serve as a preparatory stage prior to more engagement. So generally, whenever we're engaging with the public, there is a level of informing the public. Sometimes that will be the final level that we stop at. But generally, you might progress to another level as you're looking for feedback or input from stakeholders. At this level, you are apprising stakeholders of any project, issue, or decision that would impact them, and maybe providing additional information to stakeholders to clarify matters as well. It's important to remember effective engagement with stakeholders at all levels on the spectrum requires a strategic flow of information. A recent example of an informing process could be the Odessa Water Tower project. We have a responsibility to inform the public and keep them apprised of this work that's being done on the tower. However, due to the requirements of the work, we are not really able to consult on whether that work should be done. However, we do have a duty to make sure the public is informed and they're aware of any impacts on them. So the second level is a consult level. So in the consulting level, we're involving additional feedback about plans, ideas, options, or issues, and establishing what priorities, parameters, and options should be the focus moving forward. Commitment at this stage would be to listen and acknowledge any issues that are raised by the public, but not necessarily to act on them. It's particularly important to be clear about the focus of the consultation and what is and what isn't negotiable. So largely involves one-way communication at this stage, which would be feedback from the community. Although there is still an element of two-way communication through this promise to provide feedback on how public input influences decisions. So, while we want to gather input and feedback from the community, we also want to ensure that we're looping back to the community and sharing with them how their impact or how their input impacted the ultimate decision of retention as well. So a recent example of this, just for some context, might be the public information sessions that were held at the community hub. So during this process, the team clearly identified what the focus of the consultations were, any of the constraints, for instance, constraints maybe around building parcel size within this phase, and through the report that the team brought back to council, they did identify which elements of the public input they could act on, which elements could be considered at future stages, and which elements wouldn't be able to be considered at that point in time due to constraints. So the third level is involving, and through an involving process, this includes members of the public in meaningful roles, and the public is included from the beginning stage of this process. At the involved level, the goal is to work with the public throughout the process. It's not a one-off. So rather than the consult stage where it's largely information coming back to the township, there's a lot of back and forth, and it requires a more open time frame due to feedback loop throughout the various stages. While the promise implies that issues raised should be taken into account, Decisions at this level are still generally made by the organization or department rather than public. Some sample tools that we might use during a level 3 engagements stage would be workshops or polling. And just for an example, when we developed the township website, we formed a consultation group at the beginning of the project to audit our current website, to identify any deficiencies. Participants were involved throughout the development of a draft site plan, revisions to the site plan, testing of the site once it was developed. So there was several back and forth processes throughout that engagement to ensure that we were capturing their feedback correctly, and the implementation of that project went forward in accordance with their feedback. Some of the potential challenges at this stage, though, as we get into deeper levels of engagement, is that we do have to ensure that we're providing adequate training, education where necessary, and encouragement. Also, other forms of support the public may need to fully competently participate at that process. As mentioned earlier too, this requires a more open time frame as well. So just have to be cognizant of that when developing those. Level 4 of engagement would be collaborate. So this is a longer process than consulting or involving. It may include regular meetings with stakeholders. This level provides leaders and their participants with equal status to influence decision makings and setting priorities together. Often participants will be involved right from the beginning, where they're developing an understanding of what a problem is or identifying a problem. And in this situation, stakeholders usually develop their preferred impacts and alternatives. They gather feedback, and they're also participating in the analysis of data to inform decision making. At this stage, decision making still does lie with the organization or the township. However, there is much greater input from the community at this point in time. Creating trust and ensuring there's genuine engagement can be costly and time consuming. That would be one of the potential considerations. In this case, it could be an advisory committee that would make a recommendation to council. So some examples on this stage might be like the Heritage Committee making a recommendation back to council after fully evaluating the situation. And then the final level of engagement on the spectrum is empower. So in this situation, it's pretty unique, and it's a level that's not often used by municipalities. In this situation, the citizens of the community do make the final and binding decision about their own future. So individuals are entrusted to manage the process and may not have the capacity to manage it or the resources to manage it competently. So that's something that we have to keep in mind at this stage. It can be problematic too when institutional leaders or experts remove themselves from the decision-making or problem-solving process. So as I mentioned, it's a pretty unique situation where we would get to a level 5 where it's an empower. Also, council has been elected to represent the public and municipalities' well-being and interests. So as acting on the public's behalf, council is effectively here to represent the community. So some examples of an empower level would be perhaps a referendum or a vote where people determine their own future. So just a couple of examples, like in 1997, the city of Peterborough, they voted on a casino. So that was an issue that went to their constituents for a referendum. So yeah, there's a very few examples of these types of situations, but it is something that is on the spectrum. So we are sharing that as a consideration if we ever get to that stage. So those are the levels of community engagement. So the next element of the engagement plan would be the 5-step work plan. So basically, this is a work plan that helps staff or anyone that's engaging on behalf of the township to develop an engagement strategy in accordance with the framework. So the 5-step work plan you can see on your, sorry, you can't see on your screen. So the 5-step work plan, as you can see on the screen now. So number 1 is prepare and start. So at this point, we would define the project and community engagement needs, what resources are required, who's affected, determine who the potential stakeholders and the timeline for engagement. So basically, all the background information that we need before we get started to build out our plan. In step 2, we determine the engagement framework. We go to the engagement framework and determine the level of engagement based on the levels that we just covered, to identify the most appropriate level of engagement for the project. We would also use the tools and technique matrix to determine the mix of communication tools and engagement activities that can help achieve the highest level of participation on the project. What you choose can vary, obviously, depending on area of impact, timing, among other factors. Staff would work in conjunction with the communications department to develop an engagement process and communication plan that can be rolled out through this process. Step 3 is the implementation of the engagement process and gathering public input. So through thoughtful planning in step 2, our implementation plan should be well defined and understood. And in this step, we can carry out all the engagement and communication activities that were planned out in step 2. Step 4 is once the engagement process is finished, we're going to analyze the data, communicate, and share the results. So we want to ensure that we're developing consultation reports, which can compile the project background, engagement strategy, timelines, goals, engagement techniques, metrics, feedback received. You've probably seen some of these reports that have come through council, but just to fully summarize what the engagement process involved and what the feedback that we heard from the community was. And this helps to fully apprise council of the feedback, but also helps to reinforce the public's role in the process and to show that their feedback is valued by the township and forming decisions. And the final step in the 5-step work plan would be to evaluate the process and outcome. So we want to sit down afterwards and determine any lessons learned, determine what we can do better, determine if there were any gaps in our process, and how we can ensure that the best engagement process for our residents. So I can tell you through our draft development that we've done over the last year, we've definitely done this a few times and we've learned a few things, and I think we'll continue to learn from every experience because every engagement process is a little bit different, and there's always opportunities to learn a little bit more too. So next slide. Somewhat related to the engagement framework, but not as part of the engagement framework, but this kind of supports the tools and techniques matrix. But as part of the 2023 budget, we did propose an additional investment in communication and advertising. As part of this, last year, the advertising expenditure was around $15,000 for corporate purposes. We've enhanced it by about $30,000 a year. The communication department uses many digital tools at this point in time. We have township newsletters, which we send out via utility inserts. We try to leverage as many existing opportunities as possible whenever we can. However, I know there's a number of gaps that we've discovered. Primarily, there's still many residents that don't have the means to receive our digital communications. Additionally, utility inserts are one of our key communication tools, but they don't reach all residents. So there's gaps out there that we want to correct. Part of this enhancement was something that we proposed was reaching those residents that aren't necessarily online or receiving those utility inserts, which are key parts of our communication strategy. So some of the proposals that we have put forward, and we're looking for council's direction or input or suggestions as well. But we're proposing a recurring township print ad in local papers. By doing this, we can establish a consistent presence and a consistent place, consistent time where township residents can find information about what's happening in the township. Additionally, we are proposing a quarterly direct mail to township households that don't receive our bi-monthly inserts and the utility inserts. That way, we can ensure that there's more equity across the entire township and everyone's receiving those updates and information. So so we would be interested in hearing feedback from council in terms of those two proposals and any other suggestions. And then finally, I've just included the recommendation from the staff report on the community engagement framework, and happy to receive any comments and questions.
Thank you. Council, any questions or comments, discussion on this? Councillor Willis.
Your worship, I think this is an excellent piece of work. It's really well done. When you talk about the local papers, are you talking the Whig and the Beaver?
So primarily, sorry, through your worship. Primarily, we work through the Napanee Beaver and the Kingston This Week. Just because they're both free papers, so we don't want to create a financial barrier, but we have to use both papers to ensure that we have distribution across the entire township. Yeah, the Whig's distribution is pretty limited, so that's why we look through the Kingston This Week and the Napanee Beaver.
One more.
Yes, please.
Is it possible to engage with the Kingston Mist as well? Because being an online paper, I know that's the first news I get every morning. And sharing our information with them, they do cover a lot of Kingston municipal politics.
Yes, through your worship, yeah, we've been engaging them quite a bit over the last little while, and they've been really receptive. I know they're trying to establish more of a foothold in the sort of like bordering areas outside Kingston as well, and the rural areas. So they've definitely been really supportive of receiving our news releases and providing coverage in that way. But yeah, we can definitely reach out and explore some advertising there as well.
Okay. Other questions, Councillor Broderick.
Couple of comments and then a few questions. So obviously the hub thing was well done. And moving forward, Odessa West, I was probably one of the few that was online on whatever night it was last week or this week. And I can appreciate the frustration of staff when they do something like that. And, you know, I was told there was limited public involved, but at least, you know, public can't come and say, well, you didn't do anything, because they had met with, in the Odessa West, they had a meeting. They met with one person that wrote a email. They had the online, you know, there's only so much you do, but I think you're moving definitely in the right direction. Just a sort of a question in general. In the idea of your 5-step and your flow chart, what's the role of committees? You sort of briefly talked about the historical, but you know, in terms of recreation, let's say, you know, I'll throw a plan out there. Let's say you want to build a dome stadium in Loyalist. What would be the process? Would there be like a general wide open talk about sites, or like in one place you hear in the level of appropriate engagement, the public participates in the identification and development of a preferred impact and alternatives not prescribed ahead of time? Maybe expand on that a bit for me.
Yeah, for sure. So through your worship, so at that, I think you're referring to maybe the collaborate stage.
It's page 9.
Yeah.
In the report.
So I know as we get deeper into the levels of engagement, so for instance, a collaborate stage, which would be probably the highest level of engagement that we typically get to. There are situations where we don't want to provide a prescribed alternative or outcome. I think that maybe the best example that I can provide at this point in time would be through the Community Hub project, as we work through the legacy space. So we have been engaging with the Indigenous community and representatives through different organizations, and through that process, it was very different than the public engagement sessions that we had in January, because we had a sort of a clearly defined feedback that we were looking for and what we were looking for feedback on. Whereas the legacy space it's very much approaching them and seeing what their vision is, and so we're starting basically at square one, and so I think it's about coming in without any sort of alternatives, about any options, even maybe before the problem has been clearly identified, and engaging the public that way, and they're involved right from the beginning.
So in that case, you're more receiving. When you get to collaborate, in that example, you're receiving instead of giving, like, and then we receive that information, and wherever it takes you, right, in some form or another.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'd be receiving and then, you know, maybe bringing what we heard back to them and then advancing the process that way.
Okay. The only other thing, I was a little unclear on on the same engagement timeline, the bottom part, an informed input cannot change the outcome, but information needs to be shared with the community. The input, is that, I'm not clear on that first part of that sentence, what that means.
Sure. Sorry, through your worship, yeah, I'm just checking.
Same page. 16 on the report or 9 in your engagement framework.
Okay, so yeah, so at that point, the public input cannot change the outcome, so for instance, just going back to the example of the Odessa Water Tower project, if someone said like, you know, why are we doing this work? I don't necessarily agree with this. This work has to be done to ensure that the water tower remains useful and functioning. But that information still needs to go out to the community. So we're still sharing that information. Maybe there should have been sort of a delineation in that sentence, perhaps. Yeah, because I can see how everyone leads together, and it seems like it's the same thought. But yeah, I'll make a note of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just to sort of piggyback on Councilor Willis, the newspaper, I think it's painful for me as I'm a newspaper guy. It's a dying industry, I guess. I'd be more in favor, again, cost will make the decision, but of direct mailings to residents. I think that would be more effective than the Kingston This Week that will lie in the ditch in some cases, you know, things like that. That's just my own opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments, questions? Councillor Ennis.
Thank you, through the mayor. Just thinking about on the one hand, the utility bill inserts being a great way to directly communicate with residents that receive those inserts. And then sort of on the other hand, examples of consultation email lists that I've seen where, you know, you want to learn about the IMP, sign up for the IMP list. You want to learn about the community hub, sign up for the community hub list. Has there been any or contemplation to more of a sort of a comprehensive effort to get resident email addresses, you know, one time that they can sign up kind of one time, or maybe this is available already, I don't know, but or just further efforts to bolster that general sort of email list?
Yeah, through your worship, that's a good question. We gather emails in a number of ways, so there can be a lot of asks out there at this point in time, and it's probably a good suggestion for those folks that are interested in comprehensive township coverage. We gather information or email addresses from, you know, recreation participants, and generally try and tailor our information based on what their interests are. So we don't want to inundate people with information that they might not be interested in, or too much information. But yeah, we definitely recognize the fact that, you know, we don't want to send out too many messages either. So we're always cognizant of that. But yeah, we have given some consideration to developing a township newsletter, which would be similar to what we send out in the utility insert, which goes out to the subscribers. So that way they're receiving sort of the full picture of what's out there. I would say the recreation newsletters, which we send out monthly, is probably our most comparable version, but generally it's focused on recreation specific news. However, we do try to include any major township projects in there as well.
Thank you. Can I just follow that up?
Yes.
Just to follow that up. Any idea how many email users or people who use the recreation one, for example?
Yeah, so I believe the recreation one is around 2,000. We obviously have to get express consent. So we have about 2,000 users with express consent.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments on this item?
Sorry, could I just add one?
Yes.
Sorry, your worship. Just to add one more point to our website as well. You can sign up for email notifications through by signing up in different pages, or through our news page as well. So there is an ability to receive news releases or any news updates that we post to the website as soon as they're posted as well. So that's another there are, I guess I should say, there's multiple, we're working with multiple tools as well. So there's emails that go out through the website, and the recreation database is a separate database. And we also use Constant Contact for email communications as well. But just wanted to add that point.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from council? I'll add mine then at this time. I think this is a pretty impressive document plan going forward. With the time to be able to fine tune it and work with it, find the items that maybe didn't work as well or weren't as clear, and then be able to work with them to clarify them. I think this document is going to be a huge asset. And even it was interesting when I read this report, and then you go to the next report and it goes, and the community engagement is level 2. And it was like, there it is. Like it's very clear what the plan is going forward. So I like that. I'm just going to put my thoughts into the input for proposed advertising options. The free papers, I do think they are very effective, especially more. I get a lot of feedback from the rural areas where they do say, I only get one of them. So I have an avenue to get the other one so that I can see what's in it, because it never fails. The one that I don't get at home, somebody comes to me on the street and says, I saw this, what's it mean? So that's how I gauge it, is the feedback that I get. So, and the 2 that are used are free and delivered to the door. Not everybody reads them, but they do have the option. You can't get it much better than that, them be delivered. Now there was a comment in here, and I didn't hear it during the presentation, was a radio station. We do utilize a radio station as well with this, do we not?
Yes, Your Worship. Yeah, we've been working with CJAI for the last I'd say year and a bit. So we typically record news spots. We typically record news spots ourselves here, and then we send them like the produced audio file, and they've been really supportive in airing those. Yeah, it's a great resource for us. I know during the pandemic, we ran print ads and encouraged people to listen to CJAI for updates because that was a consistent means of getting information. And we, in the absence of any loyalist, news like community-wide newspaper or other media outlets, CJAI does cover the entire township. So yeah, we really appreciate their support in that.
Thank you. And just leading on that, the quarterly direct mail, I think that there is whatever the timeline, whether it's quarterly or every 6 months, I think there is a benefit to that. Again, and just going back to the pandemic, we did put out some direct mailings like that. In that situation, we had to pick and choose when we did it, because it was a bouncing ball, the requirements and the changes. So by the time you got it printed and got it out, it might be obsolete. But it was a very effective way to keep them informed of what we were working on and where to get the information. And the one thing I did, you kind of led into it, the radio station was a great place for us to be able to say, listen to the radio station, check the website, do this. All of the areas, the avenues that we had that could be done quickly in a timely fashion with up-to-date information. So that was good. And I'm glad that the Kingstonist came up. That was one of the things I was going to mention. They do seem to be covering more of the township information. So that's a good method as well. I do know a number of people that will read it online. I've subscribed to it to stay up to date on that method as well. So that's another avenue where people might read it or look for information in it more and more going forward as they cover more in our area. So that was my 2 cents. So with that, Councillor
I'll
Project,
follow up your 2 cents for one quick question. So if it was a direct mail, is that just like a bulk mail as opposed to, addressed to Paul Broderick or whatever? How does that work?
Yes, through your work, yeah, it's generally a bulk mail, so we'll book that through in the post and it's generally more affordable to do it that way, so yeah, it just goes out unaddressed ad mail.
Thank you.
so with that, if there's no further questions or comments, Councillor Broderick,
I was gonna move.
okay, ready for
We
motion?
Recommend, motion number 1, the committee of the whole recommends council approve the proposed community engagement framework as presented.
So moved, seconded by Councillor Budrick. Any final comments from the mover? Seconder? Anyone else? Call the question. All those in favor? Motion is passed. Thank you. The next item is the Splash Pad Community Engagement Plan. You're leading that as well?
Yes, your worship. So as you alluded to, this is kind of our community engagement framework in action. So we were kind of looking forward to this presentation tonight so that we could demonstrate how the community engagement framework actually looks on a tangible project. So as you're aware, as part of the 2017 Recreation Master Plan, community feedback identified strong and consistent support for the development of a splash pad. Last year in September, council directed staff to report on the cost, availability, and viability of a splash pad located in Amherst Bath, Odessa. And in December 2022, staff presented the report in response to this direction from council. And at the conclusion of that report, council directed staff to develop a public consultation plan for 2023 with the objective of determining if the community desires still remain for a splash pad, and if so, to establish the preferred location. So the purpose, oh, sorry. No, that's okay. So the purpose of the consultation, based on the resolution 2022-42, is to engage the community and gather feedback to help inform the development of splash pad in Loyalist Township. Primarily, feedback will be sought on the desire for a splash pad and to establish preferred aspects and features of the location, which can help inform the selection of the most suitable location. So we framed the engagement that way. I'd say just to help inform which locations might be most suitable, to come back to council with a data-driven decisions. That way, council can evaluate the different parts that might be the most suitable and help establish which location might be the most preferred. So the level of engagement that we're proposing at this point in time would be a consulting phase. So at this level, our intention is to gather feedback and comments from stakeholders. And once we've gathered the feedback and input from stakeholders, we can then analyze the feedback and use that data to inform decision making. And at that point in time, we can also screen for further levels of engagement if necessary at that point in time. So the engagement timeline that we're proposing is May 1st to July 1st. Given the project or the topical nature of this engagement, we're expecting that there'll be a high level of interest from local school communities, along with daycares and other families. So we want to ensure that we're delivering this public engagement prior to the end of the school year. Also, by timing it this way, we can leverage our planned printing of the Summer Explore and Play Guide to include a full page ad in 30,000 copies, which get distributed to all township households through the Napanee, Beaver, and the Kingston this week. We also want to make sure that we're avoiding the summer vacation window, just so that way everyone has an opportunity to participate and no one misses out. Because we know there is a lot of interest in this topic. And by closing the engagement on July 1st, that will allow us the appropriate time to conduct analysis on the input that we've gathered. And we can form a recommendation and a report back to council in time for the August council meeting. And by doing that, we can come out of that meeting with an opportunity to prepare for any financial impacts for the 2024 budget ahead of the budget planning season. So some of the engagement outreach that we're proposing, as I mentioned, we would like to connect with local schools, both administration and parent council, to reach student families within the community. We also see daycare centers, including LARC, as a key audience that we want to engage with. We're proposing public information sessions to be held in each community that were identified in the initial resolution. We're also proposing that we present the information to the Recreation Advisory Committee for their input and feedback. And we focused on, over the last while, we focused on developing channels within community groups, resident associations, places of worship within the township as well, just in an attempt to extend township messaging to the community and reach more community members. So we'll continue to request the support from these groups throughout this process. And this slide just demonstrates some of the planned communications that we have proposed for the engagement process. So we're proposing a staff email to make sure that staff are fully apprised of the situation, and obviously the township website, which is one of our key communication tools. So we'll update the township website calendar to include public information session dates. We'll have a new section, public alerts, and project information on our public consultation page, updates for council, CSR updates so that they're informed when they're interacting with public and residents. Email lists, so we will create email blasts to the recreation database promoting the survey and public consultation. As I mentioned, we'll email local community groups and connect with them to help broaden our message. We will work with, we've also developed some relationships with the Kingston Real Estate Association. So trying to get information out as well to people that maybe are considering moving to the community, or potentially new residents as well, to provide their feedback. Through social media, we propose Facebook events to create some awareness around the public information sessions, and an organic social media campaign. Media releases, as I mentioned, working with local schools in whatever capacity we can. The Adams Summer Explore and Play Guide, roadside billboards, as we've consistently leveraged over the last while. Working with Boylston Township Emergency Services to use their road sign, their rec center digital sign. So there's a number of different planned communications that we have. Again, going back to that initial presentation, we try to layer as many communications as possible and use as many meetings as possible to ensure that we're reaching residents as many times as we can, and also making sure that we're reaching them with the appropriate mediums that they would prefer. So for an implementation timeline, so we're here tonight presenting this process and plan to the committee of the whole. With the approval, we would begin to develop the communications plan through April 4th to May 1st. With this phase, we'll develop the communication materials, marketing collateral, and also to prepare for the public consultation phase, we can conduct community outreach with organizations that can assist with delivering the message to residents. So i.e. making those connections with school administrations and parent councils at this point in time, and to develop our communication approach to reach those audiences. And as mentioned earlier, the engagement process would be running until July 1st. And then at that point, we conducted analysis based on the feedback that we received, and propose to bring the report back to council in August. And then finally, this is the the recommendation that was included in the report for council's consideration.
Thank you. Council, any questions, comments on this item? Councillor Proner.
Just a quick question. So when you say bring it back to council August 21st, is that committee of the whole or council? I'm into time.
So, through your worship, we are proposing bringing it back to council, but, that's just.
I'm good with
Yeah,
that.
that's a flexible.
Councillor Boudreaux.
Through you, sir, just so you know, the 21st, would be at, just for point of.
Yes.
If, yeah. So,
That may be one of the ones that we've canceled because we're out of town. Majority of council are. Just to note too, on item 2, it says to be brought back to the committee of the whole for consideration. So whether it's committee of the whole or we can actually just leave that blank and brought back to council for consideration, and then we can figure that out. Probably committee of the whole wouldn't be a bad plan, just because that way may allow for more open discussion. Just my thoughts. Council, other questions, comments? Councillor Ennis.
Thank you, through the mayor. For the planned communications, there's a communication to go on utility insert. Is there planned direct mail to rural?
So, through your worship, there was, budget allocated for this process. So, there was a mailing that was proposed for this. Yes.
And just
Yes.
question just on, this might be nitpicking, but on number 3 of the survey, it's where in Loyalist do you live, and it lists only towns. Is it possible to add rural as an option, rather than having to check other, and then that will also probably provide better data in that we would, those who self-identify as rural, we can kind of break that in. That's possible.
Yes, through your worship. Yes, it's great feedback.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments from council? Seeing none, I have a question. Page, what is it here? Page 6 of the report. There's the township splash pad survey that looks like it will be sent out. Was that planned on being sent out in the part of the summer explore and play guide, or were there other avenues that we were expecting to put that out through? Or maybe that's the mailer that we're looking at.
Through your worship. Yes, I believe the intention was that we would share the link out. We wouldn't necessarily share the survey out, but yeah, whatever communications we have, we'll definitely include the link to the survey and facilitate those opportunities to complete the survey whenever possible.
Okay. Good. Councillor Broderick.
Every time you talk, I get another thing.
Just-
Just to piggyback on that, so will there be an opportunity maybe for residents who don't have access to the internet, maybe to come to the office or somewhere and do the survey?
Yes, through your worship. Yeah, that's something that we're definitely evaluating and looking at to ensure that there's equitable access for that. So yeah, in the past for the community hub survey, we did include paper copies. We have to manipulate the survey a little bit. There's logic based for online questioning, but we can do that and make sure that they're available at township facilities. So anyone that would prefer to fill it out online in person can stop by.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from council? Seeing none. Sorry, I got a tickle in my throat. We do have the recommendation before us, which was on the screen. Do we have a mover? Councillor Willis, so moved. Seconded by Councillor Boudreaux. Any final comments from the mover? Seconder? Anyone else? Call the question. All those in favor? Motion is passed. Excuse me. That brings me to the last Item adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Deputy Mayor, Councillor Ennis. All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion is passed. We are adjourned. Thank you.